viewers and listeners of this great program. You're welcome to our next episode. I'm Suleiman Isaac Mohammed, and I'm going to proceed from where we stop. As we know, in our last episode, we were trying to discuss sociology in the framework of science. We discussed the scientific status of sociology, where we make highlights on some features that qualify sociology to be a science, which implied that sociology is quite different from common sense assumption. It is sure a discipline that deals on logical and rational information, knowledge, and systematization of ideology to ensure that society is being expressed to a more comprehensive understanding. Today we're going to look at the relationship between sociology and other social sciences. I know speakers and listeners of this great program will try to ask questions. Being the fact that sociology is a scientific study of human society, it studies individual behavior, it studies group interaction and institutional association, they may try to go into questions like in which sphere sociology study changes, it study dynamism, it study it relates events, it study phenomenon, it adjusts, it relates statics and dynamism. In other words, sociology try to study statics in situations and events. If a particular form of law existed for a quite period of time without being changed, sociology will try to look at it to understand why does it take a longer period without changing. Then if there are changes, sociology will also look at social dynamism to study the causes of the change, the consequences of the change, that is the implication, the outcomes of that particular change, which may be a change in behavior, a change in features, in culture, in issues related specifically to society. Today we will want to look how is sociology related to other social sciences. Let's start with demography, for example. Sociology is directly related to demography because demography is the study of population, population structure, population dynamism. Demography is a discipline that tries to study birth rate, death rate, migration, and also the nature of a particular population in terms of gender in that particular population, in terms of majority representation in that population. We all know that no society will move forward without understanding the implications of population change, population growth. It's obviously important. It's another field of science that equally tells the number of persons that settled in a particular area at a particular period of time over a particular decade time. So demography look into the population composition of the people residing in that particular area. When we say composition, who are they by age, for example? How many are old? How many are youths? How many are adults? And how many are children? It is with this analysis that it will enlighten the public. Sociology is directly related to demography because sociology is the scientific study of human society. Sociology study institutions to understand the institutional association. So for sociologists to provide a lasting solution or to make a research towards a particular policy in a society, sociology need to look at the population structure, population composition, to know how many number of these persons are affected, and out of the affected persons, why were they affected? Then what is the possibilities for the rest segment of the population to be affected? So sociology is directly related to demography. It gets information from demography that will allow it to make a logical analysis regarding a particular social phenomenon. Let's say crime, for example. Sociology will look at crime. We know is a violation of state-made laws in the society. When you violate laws, then we call that crime. Any behavior that contradicts the law, the state make law of a society. Sociology, when it wants to study crime, study why people violate law, then it have to also apply demography to know which composition of the population are more into this violation. Sociology is also directly related to psychology. What do we mean when we say psychology? Is some to some scholars, psychology is a branch of sociology, but even though in the current phenomenon, psychology is studied independently as a discipline of its own in different colleges and institutions. So they're directly related because psychology is the study of individual mental ability in relation to their behavior. Psychology tries to look at the individual mental reasoning, their mental capacity, their mental IQ to know adjustment or the effects, and so as to relate these effects on why they behave the way they do. So psychologists study the individual um, IQ, the individual mental reasoning, the individual in the sphere of emotion, for example. They try to know what is the level of individual emotion, what are the rate of individual emotion, what are the causes of this emotion, and what are the implications of lack of emotion, a normal emotion. Psychology also do not deal with emotion, it also study behavior as well, the implication, it made analysis, the individual himself, how normal he is. Then if he is normal, how normal is that mentality reflecting in his behavior? Then if he is abnormal, how abnormal is that mentality reflecting in his behavior? So psychology also study perception, how individual perceive situations, which also led to their responses, differentiation in responses. When something happens at a particular moment, I will define it within me in a different way. Somebody else may also define it in a different way. Then psychology try to look the individual, how do they perceive things, and if they perceive them, how do they adjust themselves to what they perceive. A normal individual is expected to perceive things at a moderate level, but an individual that is not normal will perceive highly at a negative level or highly at a positive level without trying to take a stand, without looking at other variables. They make direct perception. And with this, psychologists may say that person, looking at their perception of issues, looking at the way they define and interpret happenings, they may be normal or they may be abnormal. So psychologists study that. It also study caring, love, how we give love, how the individual's ability to understand feelings, to share feelings, to give feelings, is the impulse in them to give these feelings is also part of psychology. So sociology, in the midst of studying behavioral changes, adapt the information from psychologists to understand why the individual behave contrary to expectation. When an individual behave contrary to expectation, sociologists require a more elaborative explanation from the psychologist. So which is why sociology and psychology are directly interwoven when it comes to sharing idea. Usually when people try to dig within responses, you find sociologists trying to make analysis, but their analysis is not enough because sociology directly dwell on the behavior itself, the causes and the implication of that behavior. Then apart from relationship with psychology, sociology is also directly related with let's say it's directly related to political science, which study power and power and resource allocation. Political science deals with studying analysis of power relations in the society, then how individual comes together, how they adapt. All issues related to power and resource allocation are part of political science. Sociologists are quite obviously interested because on the process, along the line, there are sociological phenomena that will come up and sociologists will be very, very interested in them. For example, during election, which is purely a political issue, when elections are going on, the response of the people towards the election is a concern of sociology. The participation of the people in the election is a concern of sociology. Why the election itself is a political milieu, but hence the sociologists will try to look at it. In the election, how does it happen? Were they rigging? Which is crime. It's part of sociology, but it's a political issue. So sociology will come in to analyze why the rigging. Then what is the level of political participation? Were there crashes during the political issues? Were there rigging in the election? And what happened? Were they fighting within the people? How do they respond? Sociology come in. Then how were youths used in the election? Were youth used as sotogery in the form of political toggery? That's a concern of sociology, to understand the level of political toggery, the level in which youths are violently used to participate in politics for the purpose of power seekers to attain or to achieve certain particular goal they set in a political, private, personal goal. So all these connect sociologists and political scientists. If you look at even the origin of sociology itself, it evolved. Part of the involvement is from political revolution. It was a revolution, the French political revolution. It was a revolution, a political issue, political ideology, to change political ideology from a republican system from a monarchical system, which is politic, to a republican system, which is politic. But sociology studied the change, the dynamism in French society in the 18th century, shifting from a monarchical system to a republican system. What happened within the shift? They are all social phenomena. Sociology study them. That is why there's a relationship between sociology and political science. Also, there's a relationship between sociology and economics. As we know, economics study scarce resources and resource allocation. Because when we deal on economics, we're trying to say it a process, or it tries to study end and scarce means, which have alternative uses. Economics try to study scarce resources, utility, satisfaction, and how to manage these resources in order to meet to what? In order to meet to the purpose of it. Study growth, it study economic growth, it study development, economic study taxation, economic study a lot of issues. It study budget, it study analysis. But sociology has a direct relationship with economics, because economic resources are social affairs. That's why the economics itself, we look at it as a social sciences, because it deals on the individual. Then the behavior of the individual matters in terms of scarcity, and how they try to maintain the situation also matters. This episode will stop from here, and it will continue next. Please don't go away, follow us.